Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Crane, and I'm the Director of Programming at the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship. And you are listening to Movement in Marketing, a conversational series that looks at the actions, strategies, and tools companies and entrepreneurs can utilize to help them achieve their business goals. In this episode, we will take a look at the 3 questions you need to answer to develop your marketing strategy with our marketing expert, Dakota Shultz. Dakota has developed and implemented marketing strategies, campaigns, and events for startup companies, as well as Fortune 500 businesses across a variety of industries, including hospitality, gaming, healthcare, technology, and philanthropy. His personal Hall of Fame includes developing 2 highly recognizable citywide art campaigns, fundraising videos for cancer research, and enduring original concept um, creations within well-established industries. I'm really excited to introduce everyone to Dakota. Hey, Dakota.
What's up, buddy? How are you?
I'm good. Just to let the audience know, this whole series started with a conversation that I had with Dakota just about how do we, help entrepreneurs learn about marketing. From a marketing standpoint, right? Let's talk to the professionals, the people who are in the industry, who have done it themselves. And I'm really happy that you chose to come and join us today and tell us about some of the things that you've been working on and also connect us with marketing people. So we really appreciate all the help.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure to have those conversations, and the organization that you guys are creating and the community that you're building, I think is vital to the city and to the business here.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, let's get to it. So I'll put in the slides and stuff, and I think Dakota, maybe just start with a little bit about your work and what you've been doing.
Yeah. So I first got involved with CCE kind of on behalf of the A&A Business Marketing, and I'll just give a real quick explanation of what that is. So I'm the executive director of the Chicago chapter of A&A Business Marketing, which is basically a network of B2B marketers in Chicago that use each other as resources, as peers to share ideas and kind of, develop ideas and best opportunities and practices and all that kind of stuff. So, on the board in that role, I'm pretty instrumental in what's going through a lot of heads of business people, marketing people within business marketing in particular. So I thought it was a little bit relevant in terms of kind of a lot of the audience, hopefully watching today and, online later are thinking about those things. They work for other businesses and whatnot. So that was kind of first and foremost. Second is Agency 360, which is a company that I co-founded about 15 years ago, which, full confession, I'm actually in the final days of beginning to shut it down and kind of go on to the next thing. But we've worked with a number of businesses, large and small, in terms of, Fortune 500 businesses down to small restaurants and hospitality industry concepts here in Chicago. I've really enjoyed working with the stakeholders in those businesses for what they do. I find that participating with that owner, the founder, CEO, whomever it is, like, you get a different sense of how they're approaching business rather than working with large corporations, though we've certainly done that too. And then the next phase for me is actually the very first company that Agency 360 worked with as a client was Hawthorne Racecourse. And Hawthorne is in the midst of developing a casino, part of some recent legislation that passed. That'll be a $400 million redevelopment. So I'm moving more completely in-house to Hawthorne to lead that effort, even though that's what we've actually been doing in a lot of different ways as far as Agency 360 is concerned. So big background there, but I thought it might be helpful to say I've been on all sides of the marketing equation in terms of, what is needed, right?
Yeah, and you're also an entrepreneur. I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
And so that side of the business too, of starting your own agency and watching it grow and also being able to now, pivot into a new situation. So I think it's really relevant, your experience, for this talk.
Yeah, totally. So glad for it. Yeah. So just a quick look at some of the companies that we've worked with. Like I mentioned, a lot in the hospitality and entertainment space, but not exclusively. Technology, healthcare, nonprofit, gaming, big companies like Toyota and Jim Beam, and then, local companies. We worked with a skydiving company. That's that weird little logo there in the middle. That was super fun.
That's
Bacon
awesome.
Fest Chicago. If you guys have never been to that, go to it, because there's just bacon everywhere. It's just so, but I mostly think about myself as kind of a writer. First, I actually went to the School of the Art Institute here in Chicago to get a master's degree in fine arts in writing. Published poet. I don't think a lot of marketers can put that on their resume.
No, I don't think so. And I didn't know that either. So it gets more interesting by the minute, everyone.
Yeah, it's, I never expected that it would be so relevant to what I ended up doing as far as marketing is concerned. But, without getting too wonky and nerdy, there's an aspect of poetry and of writing in more general terms that is just essential to communication. We'll talk a lot more about that later. So, but then also, a lot of what I do is not just coming up with an idea and kind of communicating it, but I like being involved in the implementation of it, particularly for the creative companies in the network here. Like, I'm sure they understand that element of coordinating people and putting a production on is important. So, it's a little bit about me. So, yeah. So I guess to jump right into it in terms of this kind of general philosophy that I have around how to approach marketing tends to be, make it as simple as possible. But maybe before even getting into what kind of those three questions are, I'll talk just a little bit about kind of what I think is behind that. So there's a class that I took called Systems of Writing, actually going back to the Art Institute. But if you think about writing a poem, right, or a haiku, right, there's very like definitive ways. How you need 5 syllables in this line and 7 syllables in this line. Like you're constrained by a system that you agree to, and in some ways that forces a different kind of level of creativity, right? If you have to work within that system. There's other weird ones of every next sentence needs to start with the letter of the way the last sentence ended and all that kind of stuff. Whatever your own system is that you create, it creates these parameters around like forcing a kind of creativity, which I think is pretty profound. And that'll apply to other stuff that we can talk about in terms of resources and budget and timelines. Like all of those things are systems in their own way, which are important as far as the creativity that you can engender with the messaging that you want to have. The second is, I talk about simplifying this, but that's not the same as saying make it easier. It's a matter of saying clear out some space so that you have a lot of clarity in it, right? If you're kind of decluttering in a way and getting down to, hey, we just want to focus on these 3 things. From that, you allow a lot of other open space for the growth that you want to have in your ideas, rather than going, we need to do this and this and this and this and this, and there's all these different things, right? Like, make it simple, and what I say is these kind of 3 main questions. And then the last, in some ways, is my favorite thing. Like, this is about stories. And I've tried to think for a long time if there is any one thing about human nature that really defines us more so than storytelling. And I still haven't come up with that. I don't know of any other animal on this planet that tells stories. And if someone can say, here's an example, I would love to hear it. But this is the thing that makes us uniquely human, not just communication, but the aspect of storytelling that I think is important to understand in kind of a profound way, and the way that it plays to business needs and marketing and all that kind of stuff. And then certainly behind these questions that we'll get into is this always lingering question of why, right? And anybody, Daniel, I know you have little kids, right? Why, right? Like, and it can be exhausting, but it's important to kind of inform the answers to your other questions if you're thinking about that kind of stuff. So that's a little bit of background that I think is kind of helpful with this. The last thing I'll say before we get into the questions is that these questions aren't to be understood as they need to happen consecutively. They're more concurrent, right? Like, have them in your head kind of the same ways. There might be ways in which you answer the second question, quote unquote, that changes how you're thinking about that first question. your questions and your answers are going to change as your marketing develops and as your company grows. This isn't like, hey, these are the 3 questions that we need to answer all the time, and that's it. Like, your opportunities are going to continue to adjust. So you got to go back to these questions a lot and adapt your answers and so on and so forth. The third is that this isn't just a matter of exercise for the point of, hey, what do we want our communications to be? All of the answers and the questions here should support a bigger business goal of what you're trying to achieve, whether that's driving sales, creating a community, like whatever it is. Like, the answers to these should be supportive of the other things you've done in your business plan to kind of say, this is, how we're going to achieve the business that we want to have, right? And then the last, kind of like I hinted earlier, is all of these things will depend on the resources that you have to put against your answers, right? You could say, hey, we want to do this in our business plan, but if you don't have the budget for it, how much time do you want to spend figuring that out? Right. Hey, we want to communicate with all of these people. Well, if you don't have the budget to do it, or the technology to do it, or the human resources to do it, like, focus in on a smaller set, be aware of what those limitations are that might kind of get into how you're figuring out what your communication strategy is.
Yeah. And the one that kind of popped out at me was just functional. And can you say it again exactly? So the concurrent, I understand the adaptive, but the functional piece is, like, talk a little bit more about that.
So try to think of a very specific example, but all of the answers here should go to your business goal. So, right. Hey, one of our business goals is to create a better culture within our company, right? So the answers to the questions of kind of who are we talking to and what do we want to say to them should achieve the other things that you're doing to measure whether or not you're developing the culture that you want, right? So say that as employee satisfaction surveys, for example, right? Okay, now we can tie back our communication strategy to achieving that other very specific goal that we have for the business, right? Like, make these answers work for you, not just be nice things to have.
Yeah, and I think this is something, and we'll go to the next slide in a second, but it's something that's really important for creative entrepreneurs out there who are starting businesses, that when you are thinking about how to market, you have to think about what your goals are first and connect those two. And that functional piece, I think, really focuses on connecting the dots.
Yes. I mean, you hit on something there too, in terms of, right, like, even just that, say you're a solo entrepreneur and you've got just a network of friends or advisors, formal or otherwise, right? Or you have partners in your business, or, first employees, or whatever it is. At some point, you are going to sit around that proverbial table and talk about, okay, what are we doing? What do we want to do next? Like, what's the purpose of the business? How do we want to go about it? All of that work of communication plays into this kind of then external communication strategy of communicating what you've decided in those meetings, right? Like, I'm a big believer in this purpose-driven kind of marketing, right? Have a sense of, not just, hey, we're doing this because we want to make money. It's like, that's not your purpose, like, every business needs to make money by and large, right? But you're choosing to make money in a very specific way for different reasons. Might be a particular passion, a particular talent, but if you kind of do that communication discovery to figure out your other bigger whys, that will really, I think, inform in pretty profound and effective and functional ways what your communication strategy then is, your marketing strategy.
Great. Yeah, I love that piece.
Yeah. Okay, so the questions. The first one is very simply, what do you want to say? And this is, I think, what we were just starting to talk about, right? Like, it is your message, and this is one that will change. There can be different ones at different times, different ones at the same time, that is, hey, we're launching this business. We're open now, right? Like, see us, find us, like, we're new to the market, whatever it is. It could be, we've been in business Hawthorne's been in business 130 years, right? I think about Hawthorne as a 130-year-old startup business in a lot of ways. People in the industry know us. They can know us differently. But then there's a lot of people that I've never even, there's a racetrack here. Like, it's it's profound in terms of that spectrum. So, there's always going to be that, hey, we've got this new thing going on that you might want to communicate. It could be very informational, like, did you know this, right? Like, this content marketing play of, hey, we like craft beer too. Let's talk about craft beer, right? Did you know, like, blah, 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 blah about craft beer? Like, there's that aspect of, this is just what we want to say and whatnot. The join us is I've been thinking a lot about this kind of internal aspects of hiring. Everybody, right, is struggling to hire right now in some kind of ways. And I use the restaurant industry as an example. Like, they're just crushed. I mean, if you've gone out to eat, you've probably seen those signs like, hey, sorry, we're short staffed, be patient with us and all that.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, that industry as a whole has been a little bit slow to pivot, to figure out a new message, right? Because it's been forced on them of, oh, well, no one wants to work in restaurants because, the pay is not good, the hours suck, there's no benefits or whatever. And it's this negative, but there's a different message that can come from out of that industry by people who really love it, to say, I would rather work here and be among people than working at an Amazon distribution center. Sure, I can make more money there or whatever, but that's not who I am. I need that interaction. Like, everybody goes out to eat because they want to celebrate anniversaries or little league baseball things. Like, you get to be a part of those celebrations, right? So think about that in terms of the why of you should work here, rather than just, oh, here's what we pay and you get these benefits or a bonus or whatever. So there's a lot of that going on, I think, in all kinds of other industries. And then the last little example here is certainly the occasions in which you need to say, hey, we screwed up, right? Like, here's what we want to say about that. Or also, I mean, think about the ways in which businesses of all sizes have felt forced to, or have taken the opportunity to participate in a more public conversation about what's going on culturally, right? George Floyd murder, like, everybody, a lot of people felt like they needed to say something then at that point. Like, we stand for social justice and all that. Like, some businesses, I think, did way more than just say something. They really, created action plans around it and all that. So there's probably more and more of that to come, I think, broadly speaking, of potential kinds of messages that businesses might be involved in, right? So it's not always just about your business, but it is in some ways. I guess that makes sense. So related to this is the different kinds of messages that you would have. This could be, what we call evergreen campaigns, like you're just constantly talking about, this is who we are and what we do and what we believe in. Or they could be campaigns that are, limited time offer or seasonal, right? Join us for the holidays, whatever it is, or we're doing this, we've got this new initiative that we just launched, kind of thing, a new product. You're going to cycle through a lot of kinds of messages that probably often complement your ongoing communication, even if it's a bit more passive of, this is what we're all about and who we are and whatnot. So understanding those differences, I think, is kind of key.
And as a an entrepreneur with a smaller team, do you have any advice for whether to focus on evergreen if you're just starting up, or thinking, well, your resources are low, so a very kind of pointed campaign might have more return? Or is it really kind of per basis?
It's a great question. The way in which you're evaluating your resources might be the thing that most determines how you answer that question. It could also be a matter of priority, in terms of like, which is the more important message, which is not altogether different than which will be the most effective message, right? So there's a lot of different things that actually go into that. And this is a great example, Daniel, of why these aren't consecutive questions, right?
Right.
It's coming up a little bit in terms of like, well, hey, wait a minute.
Right.
Who we want to talk to is kind of going to inform what we want to say more than what do you want to say? Okay, then who do you want to say it to? We'll preview of what's to come, right? This is why these all work together and kind of should support each other in that way, right? Yeah, a good example of that is actually the next one here. This kind of like traditional sales funnel. You're thinking about, oh, here's our leads, our prospects, and so on and so forth, down to a customer that we have, and even that diehard customer that we have, how you're talking to all of those people is a little bit different, because of what they know about you. That's going to inform what you want to say to them, right? So you have to do that work of deciding, how do we want to spend those resources? Are we start of our business? Nobody knows who us. We're talking to everybody very generally. Nobody knows us. So the message is the same versus we've been in business for 50 years, right? Some people know us really well. What we want to say to them is very different than those new customers that we're still acquiring, right? And then within all that, the CTA is, a call to action. Like, is there a very specific, hey, what we want to say to you is because we want you to do something, buy this, join us, whatever it is. Or is it more of that just kind of brand play of here's who we are? We're not asking you to do anything. We're just keeping top of mind with you, which is important too. So behind all this is what I was talking about in terms of the why, right?
Right.
And you set this up actually really well. Think about, I talk about this with the restaurants that join us, these benefits of, hey, we got pay $11 an hour, you get a signing bonus of this, versus that why of this is why it's great to work in this industry, right? Same thing with, here's this new product that we have. Let me tell you why it's so great versus, did you see Wolf of Wall Street, sell me this pen, right? Like, oh, well, the pen's so great. It's shiny. It's better than other pens versus like, hey, I want to sign a check. I want to write a letter to my girlfriend, whatever it is, like that kind of, this is why you need this. There's a purpose here versus, why I could get a cheaper pen easy, right? Tell me why this pen is going to be better. It's supply, demand, all that kind of fun stuff. And then the last is just that, kind of more traditional content players, like I was mentioning with the craft beer example, right? Like, hey, we know you like this. We like this too. Let's talk about it together. We're into the same music or whatever it is, right? That your audience is probably interested in the same kind of things that you are interested in. You've just made that your business. So talk to them as if they are those kind of fans too, right?
And, and basically, depending on what your product is, whether you're selling like an actual product, like a CPG or like a drink, a new drink or whatever, or you're selling, hey, I'm a video production company, or you're selling a membership for a new collective that you're building. So and these can kind of shift, depending on the business.
Totally. Yep.
Or even depending on the campaign.
Yeah.
Right. So like, okay, we want more members to join us is obviously going to be the one I'm going to focus on. Yep. Or, we're putting out a new course and we want people to buy this course, the members. So it's right. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not just limited to these three examples. This right. is, going back to that questioning of why it is we want to say what we think we want to say, like really understanding why that is an important message rather than just the reflexive message of, oh, we have this new widget, so we have to talk about the widget. All right, well, let's rewind a little bit. Why did you even make the widget, right? Like what's the purpose of it? And that I think will then inform a little bit more what you want to say about it,
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing to think about in the sense of a lot of what you're talking about is slowing down.
Yeah.
Which is just very, very counterculture. Yeah. Right. It's like, well, people consume content in 30-second pieces now. So like, I got to be putting that out. And, if I get, a lot of likes on social media, like that's great. But does that transfer to actual sale or, hit your message, the why?
Yeah.
And so, and I remember even when I first talked to you, that kind of slowing down of like being, especially as an entrepreneur, you think like you're on this kind of hustle culture, being able to just slow down a little bit to look at some of these questions, right?
Yeah. I mean,
that help you in the long run. As someone that started his own business and had one for 15 years, I mean, obviously all these things shifted, but I can imagine those moments that you allow yourself to slow down and really ask the why is important.
I've never built a home, right? But I would imagine there's a slowness to laying that foundation, which is really critical to then being able to put up the walls quickly, like that. I think you're spot on that there is this like, okay, let's really make sure we've gotten these fundamental things right and take our time with it. So that then we can do other things more expediently later, right? And that's to say also too, like the more that you do this, the faster that you'll get with it
Right.
as well, right? I mean, it's a muscle memory thing in some kind of ways. And I mean, I'll even take it back to, one of the things I love about writing and poetry, right, is if you're being honest with yourself, when you finally have said, this is exactly the way I want to say it. Right.
Yeah.
And if you're not certain, you're the only one that knows. And so even if it is like, hey, I only got 5 lines here, whatever, but I'm spending a lot of time to make sure each word, right, each syllable is exactly the way I want it and need it to be in a different way. Right. Yeah. So number 2, second question of the 3 is, who do you want to say it to? So you got, what do you want to say? Who do you want to say? Your audience is going to be really important. And the big hint here is I guarantee you probably don't have just one audience, right? Like wherever you're at in your business, one, you've got customers, you've got all different kinds of customers. You've got early adopters and influencers. You've got people that don't know you. You've got real need-based shoppers or whatever. You've got people that are going to evangelize your product. Like there's a restaurant that we did work for called Q Barbecue. That one of the things we loved the most is that we had some fans that were just like raving fans. And when we could hear people standing in line, looking up at the menu, and then, talking out loud with each other about, well, hey, what should I get? And other customers would start to explain, like, here's why this one is so great, or this one is so great. Then we knew we had done our job in a certain way, that now our biggest fans were teaching other people about what we loved about barbecue and all that kind of stuff. So, right. Whether it's investors you're looking for, seed money, that kind of stuff. There's all of these different audiences have a different reason for participating with you. Your employees are certainly a part of that, right? Like you've got a lot of people that need to hear different things from you, and it's not all the same ever at any one time, right? And can get kind of complicated with that. So I tend to think that if thinking about your audience is this aspect of put yourself in their shoes kind of thing, which I think a lot of people are familiar with, but it's also, to me, good communication is about active listening. It's not just about, here's what I want to say, and was I clear enough? It is like, I need to really understand how I'm being heard and listening to what that audience is then saying back to me, so that I'm changing my message and adapting it and so on and so forth, right? There's lots of other stuff that kind of behind this that I don't want to take us into rabbit hole, but just thinking about tribe mentalities, right? Like what people are feeling when you're communicating to them. We certainly see way too much of that probably in our culture right now, of people get afraid and they're retreating to tribes and, only in echo chambers on social media, and, your facts are different than my facts, all of that kind of stuff. Take out the political part of it and it still resonates in the competitive space of any market, right? Like who else is saying what about you, or about the solutions that you provide or that they provide as an alternative. Like understanding all of the psychology behind who your buyer is important to that, right? And, are you familiar with Maslow's hierarchy?
No, I'm not. I was like, let's get into it.
I won't say too much about this, and people can check it out. There's lots of stuff, but this is basically this kind of like, at the very fundamental level, right? Like this is what people need. You need food, you need shelter, like all these kind of very basic stuff. And as you move up the hierarchy, the idea is your needs get a little bit more and more refined and whatnot. So, you don't want to go in and talk to somebody about how, you're a part of their community and that you have, we're going to share in this passion together, if they don't have these other basic necessities, right? Like if some of these things on the bottom aren't met, they're absolutely not going to care about the things on the top. That's kind of how it works, right? Yep. So, this plays into not just knowing who your audience is, but kind of what their circumstances are at that time, right? You're not, I can't think of the specific example that would, really drive this home, but there's lots of really fascinating stuff here that people could kind of get into. And
well, it's Yeah, meeting your audience where they're at, right?
Totally.
I mean, and
100%.
that's, you know, there was a marketing, uh, actually, and a record executive who started this record label Empire. I saw he gave a speech at South by Southwest. It was really interesting because he was connecting one of his artists with cryptocurrency, but
Mm-hmm.
his audience was not necessarily crypto literate. So he was trying to figure out about what is the best way to reach his audience so that they understand what it is.
Yeah.
And he used like Cash App,
Yep.
because they have a toggle that you can, go to crypto, as a way of like that's an easy way for me to reach the audience. That's how I bring them to the conversation.
Yeah.
I don't want to overwhelm them, as most of us are overwhelmed when we hear all about the cryptocurrency and NFTs
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
it's, but he understood where they were at,
Right.
Like, okay.
And making sure that is even, in their need structure, is that a priority for them?
Right.
Right. Like,
Right.
hey, you're talking to somebody who's interested in investing. Hey, you should talk about crypto. You're talking to somebody that can barely put food on their table. It's like, why am I even talking about
Right.
crypto?
Right.
That kind of thing.
Right.
So there's really cool stuff out there. You can get into it as much as you want to. But you actually touched on something that's kind of particularly relevant here, is the why behind this audience then, right? Like, why is this audience relevant to what you're trying to achieve with your business goals, right? Hey, we're launching the business. Finding investors is super important to us right now before we can go out and find customers, right? How that might play. So what is it that audience needs to hear from you? Like, what can you do for them that might be related to kind of what you're going to do in the future for customers, for example, right? But understanding these different dynamics will pay it, it's going to inform what your communications and marketing strategy is, by knowing how do we prioritize this audience, what's the value that they bring to us, or all of that kind of stuff. Like, why do they matter right now? Not just to me, right? The point here is to switch it so that the focus isn't on you. Hey, this is the company. This is what I want to do. Let me tell you everything that I want to tell you, is very different than, Daniel, what do you need to hear from me right now so that I can engage you in the business that we want to do together,
And where do you think a lot of companies fall short of this?
That's a great question. It's probably in a couple main things. I think oftentimes it is, hey, here's our message, give that message to everybody. It's like, you do some work here to understand,
Right.
like, you've got different people that need to hear different things. And maybe important to say, this isn't like, oh, I'm going to go tell Daniel one thing and I'm going to go tell, Susie something the opposite, right? It's not that. Like, I'm just going to tell you what you need to hear and I'm being dishonest. This is like, no, how can I connect with you in a way that is going to be relevant to you, valuable to both of us, right? In a way that is the priority for me driving my business. Like, I might be saying something separate to Susie that has a different relevancy and value that it could be more important from a priority standpoint, right? But you should be able to kind of structure what your communication looks like so that you're doing a lot of that stuff concurrently. But it's not saying different things for different people,
Right?
Because of just who they are, right? Yeah. So the last question then, and this is where it gets even more complicated in some ways, but is this, how do you want to say it? So what do you want to say? Who do you want to say it? And now, how do you want to say it? And I think the easiest way is just like, everybody knows that you talk to your mom like that, right?
Right.
Like, everybody intuitively understands, well, no, like I talk to my friends differently than I do my parents or my grandparents or my pastor or whomever, right? Like, we all kind of innately know there's different ways to communicate for effectiveness depending on who your audience is, what you want to say. And it's not to say that, I could communicate the same information to you as I could to a stranger, but I'm going to do it in a different way because we've created a relationship, right? That can be based on style and tone and how I'm reaching you versus how I'm reaching them. The timing that you talked about in terms of crypto, like, when is the right way to deliver this message, is an important aspect of mode, right? When is your audience? I'll kind of get into that. So, understanding all of these things is important, really important to your brand identity as a whole, right? Are you humorous, right? Are you, really buttoned up like a bank, right? Think about insurance companies. Geico has a different style of communication than State Farm does, right? That just plays into their brand. They're saying the same stuff. You need insurance, get it from us. Okay. But they're doing it with totally different methods that are kind of appropriate to who they want.
I just a one question on, as we're going from audience to, you know, kind of style of communication in terms of finding your audience.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say for how does one find their audience, right? I think they kind of innately, if you're starting something, kind of who your people are, but are there any other things that you think are helpful in that, or you
Yeah,
discover it while you're going through all these different questions, right? It's not concurrent.
that's one that is probably, I think, in some ways easy to understand from a resource standpoint, right? Like you got $1 billion to spend on this growth of your business. Looks very different for how you go out and build that audience than, I got seed money at 10 grand that I scraped together kind of thing, right? The product and its relevancy, what you're selling ultimately, and its relevancy to the audience is going to play into that too. Is there a big, huge audience for it that might require a big, huge budget and effort to you want to reach the masses versus, right now in the stage of our business, I just need to reach the people that are going to be most passionate about this, right? There's some really great information out there about that kind of early adopter persona, people that just like to be in the first wave of stuff, right? I started using TikTok before anybody knew what it was, and they super evangelize that, and they're off TikTok now. They're onto something else, whatever it is, right? But they supercharged it, and now my mom's on TikTok. It's like, okay, everybody knows those kind of people, which isn't a disparaging comment. It just means understanding like how you're fitting into that type of growth mentality. Like, get to the people that can also then be big boosters for you because they're getting something out of it or because they just enjoy it or whatever it is. It goes back to that kind of who is your audience, knowing the relevancy and value and priority to you and all that kind of stuff, like will really play into building that audience. But I'm a huge believer in literally build your audience, build your database, right? Like even with these things here, advertising, we bought a lot of advertising for a lot of clients. Advertising can work, right? You need to probably change up your campaign and your message and whatnot with some frequency, right? You can see all these big brands doing that. But when you stop running your ads, they're gone, right? I put this ad in the newspaper, if you still read newspapers, and the next day a new newspaper comes out and your ad's gone, right? Like it stopped working for you. Say versus publicity, you got a story printed in the paper. Yeah, it's not in the next day's paper, but it's still going to show up online, like in the way that like you can still find, hey, this is a story about this business. People are doing a Google search for a problem that they have, and you're the solution. That's going to get found, right? That earned media placement lasts a lot longer and does a different kind of work than just an ad might, right? Same thing with social media, that building the audience, like, hey, we've got 10,000 followers on Facebook now or on Instagram. So now we can use different tools that Instagram offers because we reached that plateau. That is your audience. But as soon as Facebook decides to change their algorithms, right? Are you even reaching your audience anymore? Organic posts are way down, but reels are way up, right? Like they're the ones that are kind of controlling still how you're connecting with your audience, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Email is very different than that, right? Like you can build an email database, because comparatively, your open rates, your click rates, all that kind of stuff are still way, way higher than they are from a display ad or, search words, stuff like that. And you own that, right? You can decide, I want to send this email once a day, once a month, once a week, whatever it is, and then you're controlling the content and whatnot. So I'm a big believer in build your database, build your audiences in whatever kind of ways that you can, and use it over and over again. So, we touched on this a little bit already, but that kind of like where they are, think about how many different mediums there are out now to engage with people. It used to be, hey, there were 3 network television stations. You had to be on the 3, right? There's a gajillion network television stations or TV stations now, right? How many different, couldn't count how many websites there are, right? There's so many publishers out there of information. People are just all over. So understand where your audience is. Are they on Reddit, right? Are they on, these blogs? Are they sports fans that are paying attention to this, whatever it is, like kind of know where they are, but then also this when they are kind of thing. Like, for example, what we're doing right now, right? We're doing this live, but it's going to be on demand content very soon for anybody that is looking for this kind of stuff. So it will always exist out there, right? That's going to be found at different times for different people. We're done with it. We're over with it. But for somebody else, this is brand new. Hey, how are you? Good to see you. Like, welcome to the conversation.
Right. Right. Right.
All of those considerations kind of go into that, how we want to say this kind of thing. And then the why behind all this too is, the same as we were saying, well, what is it that you want to say, and really spending the time to dig a little bit deeper on why it is you want to say that, goes also to how you want to say it, right? Is this a moment where we're trying to really establish ourselves as an authority for the product that we have or the business that we're in, right? That's a different kind of work than we just want to get attention brought to ourselves, right? We have an awareness problem, not a trust problem. So the way in which we solve that in our communication is going to be a little bit different, right? And again, depending on the brand, hey, we want to be entertaining, whether that's dramatically entertaining, humorously entertaining, or whatever. There's all these different kind of things. Like, are people coming to you because they need to learn something, or because they enjoy, beer, right? Whatever it is your product is. It's just kind of a different type of thing.
Yeah, this is a great slide. I really like, I feel like all these things are just so important, on a consistent level of, informing, entertaining, being relevant, reinforcing your identity.
Yeah.
When I look at it, I'm like thinking about an entrepreneur. I'm like, it's just a lot of work. Like, this is like, this is a lot of work of, being able to put out these messages to push, your brand or your product. But it's absolutely essential if you're looking to grow, right?
It's work that never ends, right?
Right.
So, I mean, which, yeah, makes it a lot of work. But I think that if you're approaching it not as like, hey, when are we going to have a successful campaign in place from a marketing standpoint? Right. At points you're going to be able to go, hey, this worked, this didn't work, or whatever. But if it was successful, it still means you're going to do something again. And for the most part, you're going to do something different next, right? Choose the brand that you love most. I guarantee for the most part, they're not using the same advertising that they were using 5 years ago, right?
Right.
And even if the message is the same, they're delivering it in a totally different way, right? I mean, 10 years ago, there wasn't Twitter, right? Whatever it was. Like, I mean, these are all things that we're used to now. So how do I take what I was communicating before in a 60-second television ad and put it into 140 characters, right? Like, even just that element of, now we need to change. We got to match, our message to the mode is very different, and doing all these things simultaneously, because you're not just going to go, hey, we're only going to be on Twitter, right? You're probably doing lots of other things in terms of how you're communicating that, because of that format, is going to change what that mode is of how you are communicating.
And just one question, talking about Twitter and kind of modes of communicating to your audience. Do you suggest for entrepreneurs to focus on one outlet? Like, obviously from the previous slide, email is huge. To get someone's email and be able to put them on a list and build a community that way, you now have kind of direct connection with them. But in terms of social media, managing each one of the platforms can be a full-time job.
Totally.
Right.
Yep. I don't think I would have a blanket recommendation. It would really go to, all right, this work that we were talking about of what do you want to say and who do you want to say it to?
Right.
So
that's what you should focus on.
Who you want to say it to is an audience that is engaged on a social platform. Let's just limit it to that, for example. That is, Twitter is like a speed platform, right? Like anybody can talk to anybody. Those messages don't last longer versus, say, an Instagram, much more visual platform, a little less engaging in that way. In terms of there's not as much back and forth that you see on Twitter, for example. But if what you're trying to say is, look at this pretty thing that we have, right? Or look at how much fun we're having, that's easier probably to do on Instagram than on Twitter, right? If you want to get more people engaged, even if they're not a follower, right? But they're interested in a certain trending topic or whatever, and you've got a lot of that to say in that space, Twitter could be the great way to go, right? And it's not to say too, like those could still be better options for you than email. They just might not come with the, what you give up in terms of that control of the database is, it's a trade-off of, well, hey, we could reach a lot more people a lot more often on Twitter than in an email. Your Twitter strategy might be, hey, we're tweeting 10 times a day, right? Like that wouldn't be too much, but you wouldn't send 10 emails a day.
Right.
People would turn you off right away, that kind of thing. So,
you join a mailing list and you get 10 emails the first day. You're like, see ya.
I try to stick to, maybe if you're doing like a newsletter type of effort in your marketing, keep it to once a week tops. I mean, usually once a month is probably good too, depending on how much stuff you have going on. But, you can monitor all that obviously closely in terms of unsubscribes and spam and open rates and whatnot. There's so many great metrics that are available across all kinds of email platforms, right? That you can then, you're turning the dials. It's good. I have lots of people that would talk about advertising. Hey, did this advertising work for us? And you could say, yeah, all right, well, we got this kind of level of engagement, or we even know that, not to go too far into the weeds, but you can run like a digital ad campaigns right now that could be displaying messages in an app network, right? Or whatever. If the ad is being shown on your phone, there's a lot of companies now that then can say, hey, we tracked your phone and we know you went into the business, right?
Right.
That's a great metric of not just did they click on the ad, did it get them to a buy now button or whatever. Like we know, hey, the person that was served this ad on that device came into your building. That's a big marker of success. If you can take it the next step and see, oh, they actually spent a certain amount of money in here, then you got this really great ROI like dynamic of, we spent the money on this ad, all these ads, it turned into this amount in business, right? The problem there is that if you've done that and it's working, that doesn't mean those exact same dynamics are going to keep working, right? Because otherwise you would figure it out. Someone would have, the algorithms would have, and you would just adjust the dials to that frequency and you would never stop running that ad campaign, right? Hey, we know this amount of spend to these amount of people turns into this amount of business. Why would you ever do anything different? That's so easy, right? There's going to be dynamics that change in terms of your product's not relevant anymore, your audience went somewhere else, whatever it is that you're going to have, just the message got stale. I've seen that ad so many times, I'm done with it. But a new ad from the same company got my attention in a different way, right? So that's the adaptive part from the beginning, that you're not just going to set this and let it ride. Like you gotta keep twisting the dials.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's the gist of it. I mean, if you would like, we could still get into like, a couple of specific examples, but
I love examples. So, I think it would be great for us to go through a couple of those.
So I'll just give a few quick ones, and then and in the deck we share with everybody, there'll be some more rich media. But we were working for a restaurant here in Chicago that some people might know called Carnival. It's in the West Loop. It's been there for ages and ages and ages. They were launching brunch, right? Not unheard of, right? A lot of restaurants add kind of a new, day part segment into it. But rather than just, hey, we've got brunch now and check out how great our eggs look, or we've got these kind of waffles or whatever, it was like, how do we really, how do we make a splash with this, So the answers here are very much, one, what do we want to say is that, hey, we have brunch now, right? But we got to do a little bit more work behind that. Who we wanted to reach was not just anybody that likes brunch, wasn't just anybody in the area, but a certain kind of, hey, if you like coming to Carnival, known as a celebration place, you get all dressed up, it's lively on a Friday night, Saturday night, hard to get a reservation, all that kind of stuff. On Sunday, though, that same kind of diner, who is she, who is he? And it's this little more stylish kind of, you're not getting totally all dressed up for brunch, but this isn't, I'm rolling out of my loft and we're going to the, the
Right.
egg place on the corner kind of thing. Right. So what we did is we, well, I should say that the last answer there is how we wanted to say this wasn't just like, oh, let's just run ads or an email campaign or whatever. What we did is we came up with an event ultimately. This was right when 50 Shades of Grey came out, which was just getting a crazy amount of buzz. We knew our audience was interested in all that. So we came up with a brunch fashion show called 50 Shades of Red that was kind of telling this story of like, the girl that you meet, what she might be like then, all the way through like, a fun night out to sexy lingerie and all this kind of stuff. So that we ended up there, right? You're going to a restaurant that has a fashion show during brunch with really, really beautiful models walking around in lingerie, got people's attention in a pretty cool and crazy way, right? So, but it wasn't just, hey, let's have an event. People will come for that, and then they'll talk about it. They'll tell their friends, oh yeah, Carnival has brunch now, right? We created a video that showcased the actual fashion show and all that. So that was one. From that same video shoot, we did a whole like kind of like a behind the scenes making of the concept. So it was interviews with the fashion show coordinator, the sponsors that came in to provide the outfits, jewelry, the models, all of them talking about themselves, but then also doing so in a way that showcased this is why this restaurant, you couldn't do a fashion show brunch at Yoke, like it wouldn't work, right? But you could do it at a place like Carnival. So, and then of course, obviously it was driving sales and all that kind of stuff. So very fun example, but I mention it as a way of thinking about that mode of communication. Like there were a few modes here, but one is an event mode that a lot of people don't think about. Like doing an event is a kind of communication that is very experiential and has different parameters to it, but it still is a kind of communication that can be really, really effective, right? That if you have that experiential marketing opportunity, it can really do a heavy lift for a long time because it's visceral. You talk about the things that you've done, the places that you've been, rather than just the meals you've had in a different way, right? So we've got some really fun and sexy videos that you can check out of fashion show brunches at Carnival.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna check that out. That sounds awesome.
This one was the Great Chicago Fire Hydrants. Is one of the 2 public art campaigns that we put together. So this was, I don't know, it's maybe even close to 10 years ago, but you remember seeing these big oversized fire hydrants that were all over the city, kind of like a Cows on Parade.
Right.
Fire hydrants that were, 5 feet tall and decorated and whatnot. So is a charity that we tied into this was the 100 Club that raises money for the families of fallen firefighters and fallen police officers. But we were also working with the Chicago Firefighters Union at the time. So, what we wanted to communicate to everybody, what we wanted to say was very much like, see us, right? And we did this through the icon of the fire hydrant, right? That you only ever see fire hydrants if you're parking next to one, hopefully, right? Hopefully you saw it. But other than that, they're just these things that are all over the place, but you never pay attention to them, right? And so that was very representative of how a lot of people think about firefighters, right? Hopefully you never have to see firefighters in action. If you
Right.
do, right, you got some bad stuff going on, and they're showing up on your worst day, kind of thing, right? Like,
Right.
so how could we make their readiness a little bit more present? And the fire hydrant is quite literally a thing of readiness, right? So who we wanted to communicate this to was, and this is kind of a fun thing here, we obviously wanted the public to know about that, but the overall effort of this campaign was we wanted to raise money for the charity, right? So our audience was sponsors, right? But the sponsors wanted to be seen by the public. So we were thinking also about the public, and certainly we wanted, to be top of mind with the public. But then even behind all of that was, this was at a time actually when the firefighters were renegotiating their contract with City Hall. So this wasn't a very explicit aspect of our campaign, but as anybody who's tracked politics at all knows, if you get the public on your side and they're doing that because the sponsors have put money into it, it's going to be a little bit harder for City Hall to, or any political entity, right, to doing things in the light of the public eye, right, becomes a little bit more different.
Yeah.
So that was kind of an aspect of it. And then certainly, how we wanted to say this wasn't just, let me go through all the stats and, stories about, why firefighters save lives and, why they need public funding, or why there should be, 5 firefighters on an engine versus 4, all these kind of things. It was like, how do we get other people to talk about this in kind of emotional ways and whatnot? So anyway, we came up with this whole public art campaign, so these were some of the fire hydrants that we created, but
So
we had never done this before at all, right?
Right.
But it was figuring out as we went. We had the idea, we found the sponsors. Shout out to Wintrust, because I know they do a ton of stuff with CCE as well.
Mm-hmm.
They were the presenting sponsor of it as well. But we ended up with 101 fire hydrants all around the city. There are 101 firehouses in the city, so it's kind of a nice story in that way. Each one had a little plaque that was in honor of a firefighter that had died. But what blew me away was how many artists got involved in this. So we thought we would go and find, painters or designers, but at the top here is Sammy Hagar, the Red Rocker. Like, he heard about this somehow, and he took it full force. Like, he created his own videos, telling his fans. And then this picture was from a concert that he did out at Northerly Island, right, during the campaign, where he unveiled his fire hydrant there on stage. The firefighters all kind of brought it up to the stage.
Awesome.
It's actually a piggy bank. So then people that at the concert could put money right into it to donate. And then when it was out on the street, the same kind of thing. And then at the bottom is Fall Out Boy. So they heard about this as well. And this was like right before Lollapalooza, right? So like, we took fire hydrants backstage at Lollapalooza, got all these artists to sign it, right, and all this kind of stuff. But then it was like building on all this. So then all the fire hydrants, sponsors had paid for it, right? So that was money for the charity. Then we took them and we auctioned them all off afterwards. So that was another opportunity for a different kind of storytelling, as well as obviously more fundraising and all that kind of stuff. So I think we had something like, over a 4-month campaign that we did this, like, 40 different media hits, like 9 million impressions. We got about $250,000 in advertising donated to promote the program, raised, I think, close to $100,000 for the charity. So
Yeah,
that's
the full picture right there.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great.
Then the very last one that I'll talk about, kind of a good segue in terms of, what's next for me, is Hawthorne. As I mentioned, we've been working with for a very long time. As they're getting ready to become a casino, we're laying the foundation for how we're going to kind of reintroduce ourselves as a casino and racetrack. And part of that began with talking to others in the industry. So, as I think I mentioned at the top, Hawthorne it's a 130-year-old business. It's the oldest sporting venue in Illinois for the oldest sport in America. So no one else can lay claim to that kind of thing. So why wouldn't we make sure that we're, really celebrating all that? But what we wanted to say to people is, hey, we're not done yet, right? Like there's
Mm-hmm.
another 130 years to come. Like this is kind of a history in the making effort that is going to continue. But let's start with a quick look back at some of the amazing things that have happened. Who we wanted to say that to was, we prioritize, we need to speak to the industry first. And by industry, I mean other horsemen, people that were already big race fans, right? Regulators that we wanted to make sure understood, like, this is who we are and our commitment and all that kind of stuff. Before even getting into like, hey, you haven't heard about us before, let me tell you all about us. Like, let's make sure we've got, those diehard fans really understand how excited we are for the future, and that will get them excited for the future. But it's a family-owned business too, fourth generation. So, we didn't want to just run spots or put together, like, we needed a real voice for this. So, we put together some videos that were, the president and owner of the track, he was the one that did the voiceovers on this kind of stuff. It gave it that very intimate, from the heart type of feel that was important to who we are and how the message would be received, while showcasing the other people that work for the company. So
Right.
Tim Carey, he's the voiceover, but he's not in the video. This isn't about Tim and his family and look at us and we've done all this stuff. It is him talking about, here's all the people that work in this industry and we see you, right? Like, we're doing this because of you. So let's showcase those guys that are working on the track, the guys that are getting up at 5 a.m. to take care of the horses, that are working at mutual stand and paying tickets, as well as the fans and all that kind of stuff. So it was, our effort was, we're doing all of this for them, for the people
Right.
that love this industry the way that we do. So we don't need to be in it. You're going to be in it, and we're going to talk about you, as a way of saying, hey, we got a lot more to come, right? And there's a video that we can link to later that shows this kind of stuff. But I also included it too because it was really low budget, right? Like, all of these examples, even the fire hydrants, which really grew, like, we didn't go to the charity and say, hey, you need to give us $100,000 and we can go out and do this. We had the idea, and then the idea was enough that we went to Wintrust and we got some other people to kind of seed the concept, and then sponsors came in, then auction money was raised, and that kind of paid for the program as well as the fundraising. And even with Hawthorne, it was just like, come up with the right idea, produce those videos in a way that had that intimacy. It didn't need a big kind of like, you fly drones really cheap now, right? You don't need fixed wing to do this kind of stuff.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, I mentioned that because I know there's a lot of startup companies and entrepreneurs here that are, going to be budget conscious, and the right ideas can be done with that constraint around budget in ways that may even be more effective than if you said, hey, here's $1 million budget. What are you going to go do with it? Like, I love forcing that down to, all right, we only got 10 grand. What do we do? Right. That's
Right.
what creates.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that what you're talking about with Hawthorne is building community.
Totally.
Around the experience of a race course and a casino.
Yeah.
So using your community as a way to highlight your business is cost effective, and also it also like is authentic. I
Yeah.
think more than anything, and can help have your community also involved with the business. And I think it's a great win-win. That's awesome. Well,
The community is valuable to, showcase them. Right. So quick final thoughts, like what you say, who you say it to, how you say it, all of these things say a lot about who you are and how you are known. Right. I mean, you touched on this earlier, Daniel, like there's a lot of ongoing work to this. Same in your own personal persona, clothes I wear, music I listen to, the people I hang out with, how I present myself it's constantly changing, and that is how you are known in the world. And it's the same with businesses. Right. And then just to bring it back finally to the kind of storytelling aspect, right? Like, anybody can do this because we all are people, right? Like I said, storytelling is in human nature. We are all humans. We all have a sense of how to communicate with others because none of us have grown up in isolation, minus like the weird, kid raised by wolves that you hear about every once in a
right,
while, right?
right,
But, this is stuff we all learned in school, even if we don't remember it. Like, every story, characters, setting, style, conflict, like all this kind of stuff that we intuitively know, you can put into your business marketing plan even down to conflict, right? You're presenting what you offer as a solution to a problem. That's a kind of conflict, type of storytelling in a very, narrow type of way, right? So, and then the final thing is to, like, I'm a big believer, and you probably picked up on this, like, be the publisher, right? There's so many tools out there right now to tell the story. You don't need to go hire a big fancy agency. You don't need to invest in tons of technology. Like, there are ways out there that you can curate your own content. And whether, I still love magazines, right? If you think about how a magazine works, you have somebody that is responsible for organizing all the writers. Every story in that magazine is kind of related in some way under the umbrella of what the brand is in the magazine, but you got a lot of different writers telling all these different stories. So you're curating this network of storytellers around your kind of central theme of this is what my business is all about, right? Editing is a part of storytelling. Everybody knows somebody that's got a good friend. The guy just can't tell a story to, like, keep it straight. You just want to get to the point. What are you trying to tell me? That kind of thing. There's a talent to editing, whether that's words, video, graphic design, whatever. Like, I can't edit videos, but I could sit in a room with an editor and say, this is what I'm trying to achieve, right? This is the story I want to tell, who I want to reach, how I want to say it, and allow their talent as an editor to have that come through. Serialize the stuff. If you're thinking about what you want to say and there's different iterations of that, then you've got a lot of content, right? Like, over and over and over again. Hey, it's, happy hour hot takes, right? Is a campaign that we just started with Hawthorne. There's 3 races that all run during happy hour, and our handicapper is going to tell you why you should do that. Those are changing all the time. It can happen over and over and over again. So it's a content category that will never run out of ideas because it keeps being filled with stuff. And then you said this, like, grow that audience, right? Just think about, if you're a publisher, how am I increasing circulation, right? How am I getting more people to watch my television show, right? All of that kind of work of thinking about how you are doing your business in a way that is about communication fits within this dynamic of, especially I think with creative entrepreneurs, that there's a creativity to being the executive producer, to being the publisher, that utilizes all the other kind of talents that are within your network. So,
yeah, and I think it's really important for creative entrepreneurs out there. It's a great point of be your own publisher, be your own producer. And like you said, I mean, I use Canva to do everything, and like you can also do video editing. I mean, you can really do a lot with that tool. It is an amazing user-friendly tool. That I wish I had 15 years ago or whatever. But yeah, it's such an important thing to kind of start, if you're starting from the ground up, to be able to use those tools, curate these stories, the editing piece, like being so involved in that kind of storytelling aspect of your business.
Yeah, for sure. So that's it. People want to get in touch with me. Here's the info. I'm accessible. I'm really happy and excited to help give advice, to kind of nurture that community of, particularly, I think, creative businesses. Like, I love it. So I'm glad you guys are doing this.
Well, Dakota, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today and talk to us, just taking us through kind of the journey of different types of things that you need to be thinking about when you're marketing, how to approach it. When we initially had our conversation, I enjoyed the zoom out, of how to look at things in a macro way of approaching, and some of your options, right? And it's all customizable and it's constantly changing, right? So, depending on what you're working on, and what your focus is. Again, I'm gonna put just Dakota's LinkedIn down there. And then you can get in touch with him through that, or email me. And he also put his email. He's working at Hawthorne, which is super awesome. I look forward to hearing more about that. But again, thank you, Dakota, for taking the time to talk to us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Daniel.
Well, there you have it. What a great conversation from someone who has just a tremendous amount of experience in launching marketing campaigns. How to talk to clients and explain to them what's going to work, what's not going to work. Ask the right questions. Marketing, as Dakota said, is constantly evolving. You try something, it works. You try something, it doesn't work. But you have to constantly be looking at who is your audience, what is your story, what is your core. Are you always coming from that place? As you're growing your business. So I'm looking forward to kind of going over this again and seeing some of the things that we talked about. It was just just a ton of great information, and we're grateful for Dakota coming and talking to us today. Again, my name is Daniel Crane. I'm the program director for the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship. You've been listening to Movement in Marketing, the new marketing series that is a conversation with some expert marketers about different things in the industry. So we've been enjoying the series, and we will keep it up. So stay tuned. If you go to cceglobal.org, you can see the events that we're producing, the events that we're sharing of our partners, and the resources that we are providing for you. I'm wishing everyone a wonderful day, rest of the day, and a wonderful weekend, and we will talk to you soon. Take care.